Have you had a free-for-all with food? If so, you may be a rebellious eater. Now, that term is very popular in the intuitive eating and mindful eating circles. And in this video, I'm going to break down not just my own experience as a rebellious eater, but what that is, why we do that, and why this doesn't feel so good in menopause. I'm going to share 3 mainstream reasons why I think rebellious eating happens. And then I'm going to share a couple of reasons that may be unique to me, but maybe you can relate to them. This phase of eating can happen if you are pursuing that ever elusive hashtag food freedom, or if you want to become a more conscious eater, not diet anymore, not be stuck with restrictive food rules. And when rebellious eating takes hold, it can happen in phases, it can happen all at once, and it can even happen as a cycle of dieting. Rebellious eating doesn't always equal food freedom, but boy, it can certainly feel like it sometimes, that's for sure. So while I'm sharing why I think we go to rebellious eating for various reasons and my own experience with rebellious eating, I want you to know that if this is not conducive to your wellness journey, if you feel like this is a triggering video to watch and it's not good for your mental health, just skip it. I have other videos on just menopause health, oral health, and more coming. This is really for conversation. It is not for medical advice, and there's a disclaimer in the description below. Recently, I guess more like this summer, I realized that I was having a really boundaryless experience with food. Like I had no boundaries, and I'm not mad about it. I needed to go through this process to feel a little more comfortable with the way I was choosing to eat and to really let go of how I was talking to myself with diet thoughts. With this video, I also want to make it normal for us menopausal women to go through experiences like this with food, to have times when we're having like a free-for-all with food, because we do, sometimes at parties, sometimes it lasts a little longer than that. But it's normal, especially in the world that we have been surrounded in with diets, the push to be thin, and really just the mental restriction that can happen around food too. Mindful eating can sound good, but it can be hard to tune into your body processes, especially if you've been listening to books and other people tell you how to eat and you're not used to, or maybe you're turning off your own hunger. Now, I'm going to give you another warning as you go through this video. I might have an F-bomb in here describing a way of eating. I will try to bleep it out, but just in case, there might be a little swearing. And I am going to talk a little bit about my weight obsession. So again, if this isn't conducive for you, just skip this video, but please pick something else from me. So what is this free-for-all with food? Some call this rebellious eating. Some people will call it overeating. Some people call it eating. And if you've read the book, The Diet, you're very familiar with this term. It's also been called Last Supper eating, screw it eating, or just plain I don't give a shit eating. And this can happen when you're going to an event. I went to an engagement party last weekend. I did not have a free-for-all with food, but I have been to many events like that where I have had those attitudes like, screw it, I'm gonna eat all this good stuff. This is a special occasion. This happens through the holidays. It can happen on vacation. And this is where we get into that reset mentality where like Monday is a reset. Monday, I need a diet. Monday, I'm going to get back on track, or I'm going to get back on track when I get home. For me, this rebellious eating did happen for an extended period of time, and I'm going to talk about that too. So with all of these little terms about rebellious eating or whatever we want to call it, it's really like bucking the system, pushing up against the rules of food where you just had enough and you don't want to do that anymore. And it feels really good for a while until it doesn't. And for me, as I mentioned, it was a necessity after years of dieting. In fact, some good things have come out of it. And it looked different on different days. It wasn't constant. Some days would be overeating. Some days would be not, because I just didn't feel like it. But I really had a blanket prescription of permission to eat whatever I wanted. And truly, some days I would have cake for lunch. This was suggested to me by an intuitive eating coach who was a doctor, who was helping me get over my own diet thoughts and my struggle with my food relationship. I was eating past 9 o'clock at night sometimes. Oh, that's so bad. And really, there was no holds barred on any kind of time or type of food that I was eating. I was eating for satisfaction, pleasure, and because I could. But I was also eating because of stress. And I would even have thoughts of mental restriction. And while I was aware of them, they still were there. I think that's one of the harder things to get rid of, where you may be thinking that you're free with food, but you're faced with an event or a dinner or a lunch or something in your lunchroom at the office, and you start making trade-offs, right? Like, I'm going to have this cookie, but I'm not going to eat so much for dinner. Like, the restriction is already starting and the meal hasn't even happened. I'm going to share 3 mainstream reasons why I think rebellious eating happens, and then I'm going to share a couple of reasons that may be unique to me, but maybe you can relate to them. Number one, I think rebellious eating happens because of acceptance. We are learning to accept our bodies at this age. At least some of us are. And there's nothing wrong if you want to do things to change your body. Let's face it, aging is not fun. It's not for the weak. But we are coming to a place of accepting that our body is changing. And maybe you don't want to be in control of your food all the time because it's just pushing you to be feeling like you have to be in control of your body. And definitely, are we all ever really in control of our bodies? No. Number two is deprivation. This type of eating, this eating, this screw it eating can come from being deprived. When you've been deprived for too long, thoughts of food are bound to happen. There is a very, very famous experiment. I think it's called the Minnesota Starvation Study. It was done in the 40s where men were deprived of food. And what happened? They started sharing recipes, talking of food, and some of them became overeaters after the study. In fact, restriction is noted as one of the top reasons for this type of rebellious eating. Now, the third factor in why I think some of us go on this path of rebellious eating is that we want to deny the social norms, especially if you have lived in a larger body and you've experienced trauma, bullying, all of these things that can happen when you don't look like everybody else in society. You may want to just say again, screw it, and just go your own way. And I think that's something to celebrate. I mean, let's face it, when you get into food freedom and you give yourself permission to have cake and have brownies, or even just that pasta or a salad with extra dressing, it feels so good. It's liberating. This desire to shut these messages out that have been given to us from maybe parents or family members, media, society, it can really take hold. And I celebrate that. I mean, as long as you're feeling good in your choices and good about yourself, there really should be no rules as to how you conduct your life. That's one of my core values, is having autonomy over your body and your life. And if you've ever been out with your friends, and I talk about this a lot, but if you've ever been out with your friends having dinner and all they do is talk about weight loss, that can either spurn you into thinking, oh gosh, maybe I need to go on a diet too, or into a rebellious eating moment. Like, screw it, I don't want to listen to this crap anymore. Sometimes I think rebellious eating can just be overeating patterns that come right to the surface and we allow them to happen. It's part of the process and part of the journey. And this is where story time happens for me. I have regulated emotions through food since I was a child. One of my first podcast episodes, I titled it My Kitchen Cupboard Story, because I came home and nobody was there and I had to fend for myself. But I also did not have certain needs met when I was a child, and food became like the total comfort zone for me. It was also something that wasn't available all the time. I grew up with food insecurity. My mom was a single mom. So when you don't have food and then it becomes readily available, your body, your brain is going to be like, eat the food because we don't know when we're going to get it again. It wasn't just food for me that had a calming influence. It was books, the library, and animals, and not much has changed. So coming into this way of thinking when it comes to food, this non-diet approach, was so freeing and calming at the same time for me. It helped me accept that this was how my food patterns took hold. And I had to let go of some judgment of myself for why I ate and realize that there were things happening in my brain that I wasn't always in control of. This happened when I was a child. This patterning happened when I was a child. And after spending years scale obsessing and my 40s with obsessive fitness behavior and body checking 4 times a day, 5 times a day, moving into this space was like a whole sense of relaxation. Like I could finally just let go. I could let go of the guilt of wanting a bun with my veggie burger and telling myself that I was having way too many carbs. So I think I'm the whole package because I have all of these reasons for being a rebellious eater or an overeater, emotional eater in general. Because yes, this applies to emotional eating too. But all of this started to feel not so good in menopause for me. It felt like I was stuck in this messy situation of not necessarily feeling balanced, or dare I say controlled, because that's like a taboo word in the non-diet world. But I was feeling like I wasn't really taking care of myself. Now, I know that food and nutrition is foundational to health, but it's not the be all and end all. We have social determinants of health. There's things about health you can't control. Yet, I did want to feed myself a little bit differently and a little more balanced because I had health worries and I was losing my abilities as a conscious eater because I was letting this rebellious phase take. And maybe what I want to share in this video is that even though I do teach mindful eating and I teach about the food relationship, I'm still human. And yes, these things can raise their ugly heads at any time in our lives. Many of us do have health worry at this age. You probably do. I know I do. We have joint discomfort, and I'm not talking about joint discomfort in relation to weight. There can be many reasons why we have joint discomfort, including lack of minerals and vitamin D, and even just plain inactivity. But there's also brain fog. And my big concern was blood sugar. When I had my breast implant infection, I had elevated blood sugar, which totally surprised me, especially because I think I'm a healthy eater, and I generally am. But seeing that when I have no history of diabetes in either side of my family, I was like, what is happening here? And I do not want the effects of uncontrolled blood sugar in my life. Now, thankfully, those markers have calmed down since I addressed the infected breast implants, but it's still in the back of my mind about controlling my blood sugar. So I definitely do think about all of these things as I try to come to a more balanced approach with food. In fact, I think my October intention is going to be balance. Depending on the types of food that you may be eating and that I was eating when it comes to like these rebellious eating episodes, if it's too much cake, if it's too much trans fat, too much cookies, I mean, goodness, even too much celery, you are going to have imbalances in the body. And some of the processed foods, yes, they do increase health risks. And that is combined with other things, okay? So blood sugar can be combined with inactivity and processes in the body that are just not in our control. I do want to recognize that. I'm not trying to say that we can control everything with food. It's just that certain foods may increase your risk if you are predisposed to a certain health condition. And when you pair this with menopause, we do have an increased risk of heart disease with less estrogen and other hormones. We do have an increased risk of uncontrolled blood sugar, insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes. There are also risks for our bone health. So we do need to have a good, nutritious diet most of the time to feed our bodies. Despite all of these things, if you are overeating, if you are rebellious eating, I just want you to know that I see you and I feel you because I've been you and I can still be you. There's nothing to be ashamed of when it comes to emotional eating and overeating in general. I think we need to bring a broader perspective to why emotional eating happens, why overeating happens, and even why we may buck the system when it comes to food. We are all wired differently, and the way we eat will depend on what's happened in our childhood, our beliefs about ourselves, our beliefs about food, and our life experiences. I will have some upcoming videos that will share what I am doing to counteract this feeling of being too rebellious with food and not feeling like I am nourishing myself as I was moving through my September intention of nourish. So look for those as I trickle them out through the coming months. Let's remember that midlife wellness is more than just food.